Okay, welcome to Microecon podcast. I'll be your host tonight. My name is Jenna Moore, and my guest tonight is Delaney Nelson. She's a student at Northern Arizona University. We went to school together and got our first degrees at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and there we learned a lot of ugly truths about the fashion industry and how detrimental it is to not only our mental health and like everything we think about in our appearance, but also the economy and the environment. So yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experiences at FIT and kind of your overall thoughts about it?
Sure. So I guess I started my journey at FIT very naive, was shaken up real quickly when I started my classes, and I was studying fashion business. And I just immediately, almost with, even though I didn't really recognize it until about a year later, I could feel something off about it. I did go into fashion knowing that I wanted to focus on sustainability. Um, as things started to progress, I just found myself becoming more and more disgusted with the industry and what it produced. And so my second year at FIT, I became a lot more involved in a organization called Extinction Rebellion. And so I did some activism with that. It opened my eyes to this new world of like what activism is and the extreme changes that needed to happen, because if we didn't make those changes, like extreme changes were going to happen regardless. So being involved with XR really got me like a lot more passionate about environmental issues, and just unfortunately made me even more disgusted with fashion, because I started to see through all of these like economic models that were not sustainable, and these cultural values within the industry that don't help it in any way. And so it felt like everything was wrong. And even the brands that claimed to be sustainable, I just didn't want to believe. I still didn't want to support. And so what finally like made me decide that I wanted to leave, actually I don't know what exactly it was. I think it was a buildup of things, but I recognized that I needed to step away. I'm now studying environmental sustainability at Arizona University, and learning a lot of real solutions, and understanding that this is all working in a system. So when we're looking at fashion, we need to like look at all sides of it, both control, the economic, the environmental, because they're all connected.
I have some statistics here. So first of all, we've come to this concept of like hyper consumerism that's really led by fast fashion and nowadays Instagram. We buy 5 times more clothing than we did in 1980. And this is something that I was super surprising to me when I first got to FIT, just kind of to learn like the journey of the fashion industry, 1950 to 2020 of there used to be like 4 seasons. Like now, one of the first things, what was that class? Intro to Fashion Industry that we both took, because we used to be in the same major. And and one of the first things you learn is that we went from 4 to 6 seasons a year of selling clothes. You would go to the mall, we went from that to 52 seasons a year and counting, to be honest. Like there's back to school season, there's holiday, there's pre-fall, there's resort. Clothes are being, pumped out so quickly. And it's kind of this thing of just like, we're bored, just shop to shop, and we don't really shop with a purpose, and we don't look at like the fabric makeup of the quality of our clothing. I think the biggest thing, I want to talk a lot about this, is Instagram. Psychologically, we have become so obsessed with our appearance, and we've become so obsessed with the likes, the platform, and there's this new career of like influencer and all this stuff. And Instagram recently created it to where you can tap and like and buy something on instant. And then with the newest update of Instagram, the bottom, there's like feed, explore, post, shopping, and then yours. They replace the notification icon at the bottom with a shopping icon. So Instagram is really profiting off of consumerism, but it's coming at like a really, really high cost of irreversible damage.
But no matter what we're consuming, it's come from the earth. Whether that's your iPhone and the minerals and the battery, those were mined somewhere. The clothing that you're wearing, it's formed of, either if they're natural fibers, where you have non-natural fibers, which are essentially plastics. And we know that plastic is made from oil. And so whatever it is that we are consuming it's a product of the earth. And as we continue to take more and more, it means that we're depleting our resources. And while we're doing that, we are, degrading habitats and ecosystems, and essentially our air and our water and our soil, which are all vital to our life. So consumption is directly tied to the degradation of our environment. We also know that as we produce things, greenhouse gases are emitted, and that is what is contributing to the greenhouse effect, which is warming our climate and making room for these terrible disasters such as hurricanes and tornadoes and droughts, that are making conditions unlivable for many people. And this is already happening in places in the world.
Yeah.
It can be directly tied back to how much we're consuming. Also, the waste that comes from all of this. We pick something up, we use it once, and then we're done with it, but it doesn't mean it's leaving the earth. And it's the amount of microplastics that come off from our clothes even. It ends up in our water and eventually ends up in the food chain. So, if we think we're not the one, like, we're not being affected by it, we are right now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's been this trend of of using recycled materials for new items. And it's really tricky, I think, especially with our experiences at FIT. FIT, puts a lot of research and thinking into sustainability, but the reality, I think, is that no new product can be sustainable. So there is a trend in companies, being sustainable, and I have right here, Patagonia was one of the first companies to make recycled items, in that they use recycled bottles to make their polyester fleece jacket. And we've also seen the Everlane, the Renew Puff that they make out of water bottles. And there's also Girlfriend Collective that makes activewear out of recycled bottles. And so, but I just wanted to touch on the argument of recycled items versus resale items, and how much resources we have, and because it's proven that it doesn't cost that much more to make recycled items, but it does take longer, and it just takes more production design and energy. It takes longer. So yeah, I just want to kind of touch on the argument of how sustainable something can really be compared to what we already have. The argument that a lot of people have is that the most sustainable thing someone can do is just not buy any clothes ever.
Yeah, I think what you're addressing is the underlying issue that's driving climate change, which is that we can't continue business as usual, and business as usual is continuing to buy things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we live in a society that that requires us to buy things and survive off of consumption. That is, we are given no choice. So what needs to happen is systematic change, and perhaps even, new economic systems that aren't built upon exchange of money for a good.
Yeah.
And there are many ideas of how we could function otherwise, starting with the idea of not basing our economy off of GDP. But it's all related back to this issue of we can't keep doing things the way that we're doing, and if we continue to produce items, even if they're made out of recyclable things, it's still continuing with business as usual. Um, and so I agree, like the best thing you can do is use what you already have.
Yeah, exactly. Can you kind of like woman-splain, if you will, the concept of greenwashing? Because not a lot of people know what it is.
So greenwashing is when a company claims to be sustainable and, markets their products as either being recycled or like made from natural or organic cotton or something like that. Um, but in reality, it's not actually that sustainable for the environment, or they are just plain out lying. And it's this idea of fitting into a trend, because being sustainable has become a trend, which in my opinion is an issue, because it's not a trend. it's it's what's like our life is at stake for this, and I think a lot of companies are just using it as a profit motive. And so what it is just claiming to be sustainable despite having a business model that is constantly like pushing out more and more that's for people to consume. So H&M is a great example. No fast fashion can be sustainable. There's for that to be, because of their business model, where it's always about consuming more and more. You're always putting out more products. Yet they put out a line that was supposedly sustainable. And there's no way, like you can't believe that. You can't on that. You can't, think, oh, by buying this, like it's better. No, by buying it, like you're still buying something and you're supporting a company that does a lot of things wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also, the idea or the fact, I guess, that if a company uses any percentage of recycled material, there's not a lot of like policies on advertising when it comes to greenwashing, because it's kind of, sustainability is like a relatively new idea in advertising that has proven to be really profitable for a lot of companies, and especially in fashion. Reformation, Everlane can have one sustainable practice, like you were saying, and then completely like have a whole other problem in their business model that's not sustainable. So another thing that like I was surprised to learn about when I first got to FIT was that sustainability is also having to do with like the well-being of all people. It's not just about not using a plastic straw. Zero tolerance policies for racism and sexism in the workplace, like that all ties into sustainability. And like Reformation is a company that um got into a lot of trouble for their racist policies, but has been profiting off of sustainable fashion for a really long time, even though they do use synthetic fibers. I think all of this for both of us was really surprising.
And overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. So neither of us obviously go there anymore. What is something that you've taken from FIT and like you're now studying this and you're like, wow, this makes a lot more sense to me?
How the world functions, just in general. I mean, I think any education will broaden horizons and understand like a bigger picture. But as for fashion, one thing I'm still really like feeling invested in is textiles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot that could be done within that field that could like go beyond just fashion. And I think that shows that fashion is connected to so many other things other than just what we put on our body. And no matter what, like that's going to follow us. And I'm not going to be able to just like leave behind fashion just because I don't go to fashion school or I don't live in New York City anymore. Because it really is about identity and the way that you perceive yourself in the world, and the way that you understand, like, I don't know, your place. And so I guess just like the idea of fashion in general brought me like a bigger perspective of who I am and where I sit in this world. And that helps a lot with any education. I think it can really propel thinking in new ways.
It's funny too, like I kind of feel the same way. I've been thinking more about the clothes that I put on my body now that I don't go to FIT. Like, because I think I was kind of drowned by the aspect of like, it's on me to like only buy used clothes and so on me to like do this. And it's such a systemic issue that it is, there's so much power in like not buying. But also I think I've found more power in like finding something that I love instead of being kind of, I don't know, I feel like I was always drowned by this fear of what will this do to the earth if I buy this item? It's sad that that is the reality. I think like a big thing of it too, I'm pretty sure anyone who has seen a fashion documentary has learned about the Bangladesh, the burning down, collapse of the factory.
It's a human rights issue.
Mhm.
So over 1,000 people died in that collapse. And it's just this idea that we value our things more than human life,
Mhm.
um, which is so backwards. But you know, when it's across the world and all you have to do is pick it off the rack and um, pay for it, you know, you lose that connection. You don't know it, and even if you do, you can be ignorant because it's not right in front of you.
Yeah.
So it's because I think there's this long process between what the reality is and what it ends up being. I think the meaning gets lost, the connection gets lost, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like it's a very, very big issue. I actually have statistics on those as well. So, a lot of clothing is made in Bangladesh where their minimum wage is $68 a month. Like, absolutely absurd. Cambodia, over 600,000 people work in the garment industry in Cambodia. Their minimum wage is $100 a month. And I think we can all agree that, like, that's not livable. And the profit that companies are making off of, like, because fashion companies have proven to be very economically strong in making a profit, and the way that they're able to do that is to outsource this work and this labor from places who have people who will work for $68 a month. And it's just absolutely insane that we don't even think about that. But if a company were to not exist, we're like, oh, people would lose their jobs. But it's like, actually, the comparison of like their employees here and their employees there are like, it's not much. So I think it really is a human rights issue. But I just want to kind of talk about which companies are doing things right and which companies are doing things wrong.
Yeah, I mean, of course, first that comes to mind is Patagonia.
Yeah.
That's what everyone thinks as well. You know, the climate crisis is
Mhm.
closely tied to um, like marginalization of people, and I think they do a pretty good job of understanding that, you know, people of color, they're already experiencing the effects of climate change, and I think that's one of the biggest issues to focus on within tackling climate change. So I applaud them for that. They also have a genuinely good business model. They understand like that consumption is what's leading to climate change.
Mhm.
They try their hardest to not get people to consume that much.
Mhm.
They really try to like create long-lasting products and encourage people to upcycle their products and they resell the products. So I would say Patagonia, and to be honest, I can't really compare any other company to Patagonia. I don't.
I mean, we've seen companies who are like more ethical and sustainable kind of become more popular, and it's back to like the greenwashing thing. It really is like a trend to be sustainable, but it's tough. It's hard. It's easy to get into the world of like sustainability and sustainable fashion, but it's super hard to realize what it actually means and like which companies are actually doing things that matter. And I think the labor and the amount, the quantity of product itself is a much bigger issue. A garment can be made by like from half recycled material, but it's like if someone's still gonna buy it and like throw it out a year later, like it's not really that much different. It's been, I think like they've definitely had a rude awakening, and like I hope that we're not the only ones at FIT who recognize this problem. I mean,
I had a problem with FIT in general.
yeah.
Yes, it's great that they have a green roof. But when their main education is focused on getting people to consume, I can't trust them. I cannot
No.
trust them. And it just felt very, disconnected from reality. Uh,
Mhm.
that, oh, it's fine. Like, if we make things sustainable, we can keep moving at the pace we're moving. So yeah, just the fact that FIT's whole education was based around that idea, yet this like claim to be sustainable. That's a perfect example of greenwashing.
Oh, exactly. Because also, I think we were being groomed to work in an industry and told like, yeah, it sucks. There's a lot of like ethical and sustainable issues that you're gonna have to deal with, but like that's your career. That's gonna have to how you're gonna have to make your money. And I think one of the first like realizations that I had of like, I'm not happy here and I want to go somewhere else and do something else, was that I don't want to make my money profiting off of something that's one, ruining the earth, and something that two, I put a lot less work into than the person that actually made it, and they're getting paid a couple cents a day. That is just like such a crazy reality that we're just supposed to overlook. Besides our hyper consumerism, it doesn't really have a lot to do with our domestic economy. I took a marketing research class, and my professor was teaching marketing, and she put it into the perspective of like the psychological process of buying something is literally like the Ariana Grande. Wait, I have it written down. It's like, I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it.
Yeah.
She said it's literally that is how we think of buying things. Like we see it on Instagram, we see it in the mall, and it's just like, oh, I like that. And it's that instant like serotonin boost.
This is the way we've been taught to be.
Mm-hmm.
And no, there was no questioning of this system while at FIT, and I think that was a big issue for me. But, even thinking about AI and how it shapes our behavior to get us to consume more. So the whole system is, that's the goal of it all, is to get us to consume more. And so I don't want to necessarily blame us for feeling like we should consume. Also because we have nothing else to fill our lives with meaning, at this
Yeah.
point, this is all we're left with. Like, change is going to happen no matter what. But
Mm-hmm.
decide how that change happens. We have very little time to do that, but unfortunately, reality is looking grim.
I don't know. What are some things that you think we can be more critical about with our government and like with people in power? Like what are some things that you want to see done in regards to like the domestic fashion industry and also companies that kind of outsource that?
um, well, first of all, vote. That's something we can all do. As for policy, something to tackle fashion in regards to climate change. If there were to be more government funding in innovation for textiles, um, and you know machines that use an insane amount of energy, um, and just even government funding for renewable energy in general, it all has an impact. I think there could be limitations to water usage, um, and just maybe the idea of a carbon tax and enforcing that on these fashion companies regardless of where they operate. I'm not sure if that's constitutional, but it's an idea. So that's what comes to mind as of now.
Yeah, all of this would be absolutely incredible. I mean, right now it's kind of up to the certain companies. I know that Aritzia recently went carbon neutral, which is great. But I think it's kind of a sad reality that they're not regulated on that much, and like it's kind of up to the companies for right now. But also I think you're right. Like what we can do as consumers is to vote and also use our wallet to vote and just kind of say like I'm not going to give money to H&M or I'm not going to give money to Amazon.
Yeah,
Like yeah, I think there's a lot of power in that because companies can only operate at the level of, the profit that they're making.
right. And I think one plus side to social media is that it allows consumers' voices to be heard.
Yeah.
So, you know, companies are a lot more keen to listening to their consumers. I think there's really been a dramatic shift between, the companies getting to decide like what happens with their products and like how to move forward, to now where it's really the consumers who decide and it's the companies who are listening to them. Um, so I do think there's power in what we want and what we want to see. Uh, but at the same time, we need to remember that the whole system is broken.
Yeah.
And that ties into so many other areas in politics that if those were addressed, then they would be addressed within fashion.
Clothing is a common ground. It's a really good place for someone to start if they want to, know more about how our everyday life impacts climate change. I mean, there's so many layers to it, but I think this conversation has been so good.
I could talk about this all day. One big thing that I've really been focusing on lately is the regulation of big tech. And I do think that has close ties to the fashion industry and consumption. So if y'all are interested in anything like that, I do recommend the book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism.
So, on that note, we're going to end it, but thank you so much for taking your time to speak with me and speak to my audience. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I really appreciate it too.